Hello everyone, and welcome to another journey into the unknown. This is your host, and you have found your way to Forbidden Mysteries. I know many of you use these stories to help you drift into peaceful sleep. So before we begin, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Make sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest mysteries. I would love to know where you are listening from tonight and what time it is in your corner of the world. Drop a comment below and let me know. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind prepare to wander into the mysteries that lie just beyond our understanding. James Mitchell had been driving 18-wheelers across the American Southwest for nearly 15 years when his life changed forever on a humid August night in 2019 just outside Phoenix, Arizona. He was hauling a load of electronics from Los Angeles to Dallas, following his usual route along Interstate 10, when something happened that would challenge everything he thought he knew about reality. The 43-year-old father of two had always been a practical man, the kind who believed in what he could see, touch, and explain. He'd grown up on a ranch in rural Montana, served 4 years in the Army, and spent his adult life methodically moving freight across thousands of miles of American highways. James wasn't the type to make up stories or seek attention. He was quiet, reliable, and had never even called in sick to his trucking company in over a decade of employment. That particular night, James was running slightly behind schedule due to an extended mandatory rest stop in Indio, California. The temperature had reached 118 degrees during the day, making driving conditions nearly unbearable, even with the air conditioning running full blast. By the time the sun set and the desert air began to cool, he was eager to make up lost time. His CB radio crackled occasionally with chatter from other drivers, mostly complaints about construction delays and way station backups. The familiar rhythm of diesel engines and tire noise on asphalt had become almost meditative to him over the years. He knew every mile of this stretch of highway, every truck stop, every steep grade and sharp turn. The desert landscape scrolled past his windshield in the darkness, illuminated only by his headlights and the occasional glow from distant city lights. Around 11:30 p.m., about 20 miles east of Phoenix near the Superstition Mountains, James noticed something unusual in his rearview mirror. At first, he thought it might be an aircraft from nearby Sky Harbor International Airport, but the lights seemed too bright and too close to the ground. He'd seen countless planes over the years, both military and civilian, and something about this didn't match any known aircraft pattern. The lights appeared to be following his truck at a consistent distance, maintaining the same speed as his rig. When he slowed down to let what he assumed was another vehicle pass, the lights slowed as well. When he accelerated back to highway speed, they matched his pace exactly. Growing concerned that he might be dealing with some kind of road rage situation, James reached for his CB radio to check if other drivers were experiencing similar problems. Before he could key the microphone, his entire truck was suddenly bathed in an intense white light that seemed to come from directly overhead. The illumination was so bright that it completely washed out his headlights and made the desert around him visible as clearly as daylight. Every detail of the rocky terrain scattered. Cacti and distant mountain peaks became crystal clear. James felt his heart rate spike as he realized that whatever was above him had to be massive to cast such widespread illumination. He pulled his truck over to the shoulder of the highway, hands trembling as he set the parking brake and activated his hazard lights. The white light continued to flood the area, and James could feel a strange tingling sensation throughout his body, similar to the feeling of static electricity before a thunderstorm. His radio began emitting loud bursts of static, and the digital displays on his dashboard flickered erratically. The CB radio squealed with electronic interference, making communication impossible. James tried to use his cell phone to call 911, but the device wouldn't respond to his touch, its screen frozen on the home screen. Gathering his courage, James opened his driver's door and stepped down from the cab of his truck. The night air was surprisingly cool, and he could hear an unusual humming sound, like a massive electrical transformer operating at high capacity. Looking up, he saw something that defied his understanding of physics and aviation. Hovering approximately 200 feet above his truck was an enormous triangular craft, easily the size of a football field. The object was perfectly silent, except for the electrical humming, with no visible means of propulsion. 3 bright white lights occupied each corner of the triangle, while a pulsing red light sat at its center. The surface of the craft appeared to be a dark metallic gray, with what looked like panel lines or structural seams visible in the intense illumination it was casting downward. James stood transfixed, unable to move or speak, as the massive object remained motionless above him. He later estimated that this silent encounter lasted approximately 10 minutes, though time seemed to move strangely during the experience. The humming sound gradually increased in intensity, and James began to feel dizzy and disoriented. His vision blurred slightly, and he had to grab onto his truck's door handle to maintain his balance. The tingling sensation in his body grew stronger, and he noticed that the hair on his arms was standing upright. Without any warning, the craft's light suddenly dimmed, and the object began to move. It didn't accelerate gradually like a conventional aircraft, but instead moved from a complete standstill to an incredible speed, almost instantaneously. The triangular craft shot straight up into the night sky, reaching what James estimated must have been several thousand feet in altitude within seconds. The white light that had illuminated the desert faded quickly, leaving James standing in the darkness beside his truck, lit only by his hazard lights and the distant glow of Phoenix on the horizon. The electronic interference ceased immediately after the craft departed. James's radio stopped crackling with static, his dashboard displays returned to normal operation, and his cell phone began working properly. His hands shaking, he immediately called 911 to report the incident. The dispatcher was professional, but clearly skeptical, asking repeatedly if James had been drinking or using any substances. He assured them that he was completely sober and offered to take any tests necessary to prove it. The dispatcher connected him to the Arizona Department of Public Safety, and a state trooper arrived at the scene within 30 minutes. Officer Rebecca Martinez found James sitting in his truck, still visibly shaken by the experience. She later wrote in her report that Mitchell appeared genuinely distressed and showed no signs of intoxication or mental impairment. James walked her through exactly what had happened, pointing to the spot in the sky where the craft had hovered and describing the sequence of events in careful detail. Officer Martinez noted that James's story remained completely consistent throughout multiple tellings, and that he seemed reluctant to discuss the incident rather than eager for attention. She also observed that the asphalt around James's truck appeared to have an unusual warm temperature despite the cool night air. The encounter had lasting effects on James's life that extended far beyond that single night in the desert. He began experiencing frequent nightmares featuring bright lights and feelings of paralysis. His sleep patterns became erratic, and he found himself constantly scanning the sky during his driving routes, both hoping for and dreading another encounter. James's wife, Linda, noticed dramatic changes in his personality. He became more withdrawn and introspective, spending hours researching UFO sightings online and reading every book he could find about extraterrestrial encounters. She was initially concerned that he might be having some kind of mental health crisis, but James's account never wavered, and his behavior remained rational in all other aspects of his life. 3 months after the initial encounter, James filed a report with the Mutual UFO Network, the civilian organization that investigates UFO sightings. MUFON investigator Dr. Patricia Hoffman interviewed James extensively and found his account compelling and credible. She noted that James's description matched several other reports of triangular craft sightings in the Phoenix area, and that his emotional responses and physical symptoms were consistent with what researchers call close encounter syndrome. Dr. Hoffman also discovered that James's truck's electronic logbook had recorded several anomalous readings during the time period he claimed the encounter occurred, including unexplained fluctuations in the engine's computer systems. The investigation revealed that James wasn't alone in his experience that night. Two other truck drivers, traveling on parallel routes approximately 15 miles away, had reported seeing unusual lights in the sky around the same time. A family, camping in the Superstition Wilderness, had also contacted local authorities about strange illumination that had lit up their campsite for several minutes. These corroborating reports helped establish that something unusual had indeed occurred in the area. Though none of the other witnesses had as close or detailed an encounter as James. James eventually returned to long-haul trucking, but he made a point of avoiding night drives through that particular section of Arizona highway. When his route required him to travel through the Phoenix area, he would schedule his trips to pass through during daylight hours. His employer was understanding about this scheduling request, especially after Officer Martinez's report became part of the official record. James never sought publicity or financial gain from his experience. He declined several offers from television shows and documentary filmmakers who wanted to feature his story. The encounter fundamentally changed James's perspective on humanity's place in the universe. A man who had previously been focused entirely on practical day-to-day concerns found himself contemplating profound questions about life, consciousness, and the possibility that Earth is regularly visited by intelligent beings from other worlds. He began attending local UFO research group meetings, not as a speaker or attention seeker, but as someone seeking understanding and connection with others who had experienced similar encounters. Today, James continues to drive professionally, though he has moved to shorter regional routes that keep him closer to his home in Tucson. He still scans the sky during his nighttime drives, carrying a digital camera in his truck in case he encounters something unusual again. While he hopes never to experience the fear and disorientation of that August night again, James has come to view his encounter as a privilege of sorts, a glimpse into mysteries that most people will never witness firsthand. The experience has made him more open-minded about possibilities beyond conventional understanding, while maintaining his reputation as a reliable, honest, and level-headed professional driver. Rebecca Thompson had been working the night shift at Providence Portland Medical Center for 8 years when she encountered something that would challenge her scientific training and rational worldview. As a registered nurse in the intensive care unit, Rebecca was accustomed to high-stress situations, life and death decisions, and maintaining composure under pressure. The 34-year-old had earned her nursing degree from Oregon Health and Science University and prided herself on her analytical thinking and evidence-based approach to problem solving. She had grown up in a military family, with her father serving as a career Air Force pilot, which gave her extensive knowledge of aircraft and aviation technology. Rebecca could identify virtually any conventional aircraft by sight and sound, from commercial airliners to military jets to helicopters. On the night of October 15th, 2021, Rebecca was driving home from her shift at the hospital, traveling north on Interstate 5 through the industrial area near the Columbia River. The time was approximately 3:45 a.m., and the streets were nearly deserted except for a few long-haul truckers and early morning commuters heading to dawn shifts. Portland's characteristic drizzle had stopped earlier in the evening, leaving the pavement damp but the sky relatively clear. Rebecca was listening to a podcast about medical research while mentally reviewing the events of her shift, which had been particularly challenging due to several critical patients requiring intensive monitoring. As she passed the exit for Swan Island, Rebecca noticed unusual lights in her peripheral vision. At first, she assumed they belonged to a helicopter, possibly a medical transport heading to one of the area hospitals. However, when she glanced toward the lights, She realized they were behaving in a way that defied conventional aircraft physics. The lights appeared to be hovering motionless over the Willamette River, arranged in a perfect triangular formation. Each light was intensely bright, with a blue-white color that seemed almost crystalline in its clarity. Rebecca pulled her car into the parking lot of a closed gas station to get a better look at what she was seeing. From her vantage point, Rebecca could observe the lights more carefully. They maintained their triangular formation with mathematical precision, each light positioned at what appeared to be exactly equal distances from the others. The lights pulsed in a synchronized pattern, dimming and brightening in perfect unison every 3 to 4 seconds. Between the pulsing lights, Rebecca could make out what appeared to be a solid structure, a dark mass that blocked out stars in the night sky. The object appeared to be roughly the size of a city block, estimated to be hovering at approximately 500 feet above the river's surface. Rebecca reached for her cell phone to record what she was witnessing, but as soon as she activated the camera function, the device began malfunctioning. The screen flickered between bright white and complete blackness, and the phone became unresponsive to her touch. She tried restarting the device multiple times, but it refused to function normally. Growing frustrated but fascinated, Rebecca decided to observe the phenomenon with her naked eyes, trying to memorize every detail for later documentation. The triangular craft remained stationary for approximately 15 minutes, while Rebecca watched from the gas station parking lot. During this time, she noticed several unusual effects in the surrounding environment. The normal sounds of the city seemed muted or distant, as if she were observing the scene from inside a bubble of silence. Even the constant hum of traffic from the nearby interstate became barely audible. Rebecca also observed that the surface of the Willamette River beneath the craft appeared unusually calm, with none of the typical ripples or current movement visible in the reflected city lights. Without warning, the craft's behavior changed dramatically. The synchronized pulsing of the 3 lights accelerated, becoming more rapid and intense. Rebecca watched as the entire triangular structure began to rotate slowly around its center axis, maintaining its position above the river, while spinning with mechanical precision. As it rotated, she could see more details of its underside, which appeared to have a metallic surface with geometric patterns or panels visible in the illumination cast by the 3 corner lights. After rotating approximately 180 degrees, the craft suddenly accelerated upward at an incredible speed. Rebecca, with her knowledge of aviation from growing up in a military family, estimated that the object went from a stationary hover to an altitude of several thousand feet in less than 2 seconds. The acceleration was unlike anything she had ever seen from conventional aircraft, which typically require considerable time and distance to achieve such altitude changes. As the craft climbed, the 3 lights merged into a single bright point of light before disappearing completely into the night sky. Immediately after the craft vanished, Rebecca's cell phone returned to normal operation. The screen displayed the correct time and responded to her touch commands as if nothing had happened. She immediately called her husband David, who was asleep at their home in the Hawthorne district. Despite the early hour, she felt compelled to share what she had just witnessed, while the details were still fresh in her memory. David, accustomed to Rebecca's normally practical and skeptical nature, was initially concerned that she might be experiencing some kind of medical episode or extreme fatigue from her demanding work schedule. Rebecca drove directly to the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office to file a report about her sighting. The desk sergeant who took her statement was professional, but clearly skeptical about her account. However, he noted in his report that Thompson appeared lucid, coherent, and showed no signs of impairment or psychological distress. The officer also documented that Rebecca provided specific technical details about the craft's behavior and appearance that demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of aviation principles lending credibility to her observations. The following day, Rebecca contacted the Portland chapter of the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, to file a more detailed report. MUFON investigator Dr. Michael Chen conducted an extensive interview with Rebecca, during which she provided precise sketches of the craft and detailed descriptions of its behavior. Dr. Chen was impressed by Rebecca's scientific approach to documenting her experience and her ability to distinguish between what she had definitely observed versus what might have been assumptions or interpretations. During the investigation, Dr. Chen discovered that Rebecca's sighting had been corroborated by at least 2 other witnesses. A security guard working at a nearby industrial facility had also observed unusual lights over the river during the same time period, and a Portland Police Bureau patrol officer had noted strange aerial activity in his log. Additionally, the Federal Aviation Administration confirmed that no conventional aircraft were scheduled to be operating in that airspace during the time of Rebecca's sighting. The experience had a profound impact on Rebecca's personal and professional life. As someone who had always relied on scientific evidence and logical explanations, she found herself struggling to reconcile what she had witnessed with her understanding of known technology and physics. She began researching UFO phenomena extensively, reading academic papers and scientific studies about unidentified aerial phenomena. Rebecca also connected with other healthcare professionals who had reported similar encounters, finding comfort in the fact that she wasn't alone in her experience. Rebecca's colleagues at the hospital initially treated her account with good-natured skepticism, but her reputation for honesty and reliability prevented anyone from dismissing her claims entirely. Several fellow nurses and physicians became genuinely curious about her experience, and Rebecca found herself invited to speak at a local medical conference about the psychological and social impacts of unexplained phenomena on healthcare professionals. The sighting also affected Rebecca's relationship with her father, retired Air Force Colonel James Thompson. Initially skeptical of his daughter's account, Colonel Thompson became more interested when Rebecca provided technical details about the craft's flight characteristics that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of aerodynamics and propulsion systems. He acknowledged that the maneuvers she described were beyond the capabilities of any known aircraft in the military's inventory. 6 months after her initial sighting, Rebecca experienced a follow-up encounter while driving the same route home from work. This time, she observed a single bright light moving in erratic patterns over the Columbia River Gorge. The light performed rapid directional changes and acceleration patterns that would be impossible for conventional aircraft. This second sighting lasted only a few minutes, but it reinforced Rebecca's conviction that she had witnessed genuine, unexplained aerial phenomena. Rebecca eventually became involved with a Portland-based research group studying UFO sightings in the Pacific Northwest. The group, composed primarily of scientists, engineers, and other professionals, met monthly to discuss recent sightings and analyze data collected from witnesses. Rebecca's medical background and analytical skills made her a valuable contributor to the group's investigations, and she helped develop protocols for documenting the psychological and physiological effects reported by UFO witnesses. Today, Rebecca continues her work as an ICU nurse while maintaining her involvement in UFO research as a serious scientific inquiry. She has become an advocate for reducing the stigma associated with reporting unusual aerial phenomena, arguing that healthcare professionals and other trained observers should feel comfortable sharing their experiences without fear of professional or personal ridicule. Rebecca's case has been featured in several academic studies of UFO witness credibility, and her detailed documentation of the encounter continues to serve as a model for other investigators. The experience fundamentally changed Rebecca's perspective on the nature of reality and the limits of human knowledge. While she continues to approach unexplained phenomena with scientific skepticism, She now accepts that there are aspects of our universe that current science cannot fully explain. Her encounter over the Willamette River remains one of the most well-documented and credible UFO sightings in Oregon history, supported by multiple witnesses, official reports, and extensive investigation by qualified researchers. David Rodriguez had been working his family's 3,000-acre farm outside Amarillo, Texas, for over 2 decades when he encountered something that would forever change his understanding of what was possible in the vast Texas sky. The 46-year-old third-generation farmer had grown up surrounded by endless wheat fields and cotton crops, where the horizon stretched unbroken in every direction, and the night sky displayed more stars than city dwellers could ever imagine. David was intimately familiar with every aspect of his land, from the subtle changes in soil composition across different fields to the seasonal patterns of local wildlife. He knew the flight paths of commercial aircraft heading to and from Rick Husband Amarillo International Airport, could distinguish between different types of military jets from nearby air bases, and had observed countless weather phenomena during his years working outdoors. On the evening of July 23, 2020, David was conducting his routine inspection of the irrigation systems in his southeastern fields, checking for any issues that might affect the next day's watering schedule. The summer heat had been particularly intense that year, with temperatures reaching well over 100 degrees during the day, making evening inspections necessary to avoid heat exhaustion. The sun had set about an hour earlier, and the temperature was finally beginning to drop to a more comfortable level, around 85 degrees. David drove his ATV slowly along the perimeter of a 40-acre wheat field, following the irrigation lines and checking the sprinkler heads for proper operation. The night was exceptionally clear, with virtually no clouds and minimal humidity, creating perfect conditions for stargazing. David had always appreciated the spectacular night sky visible from his remote location, far from the light pollution of Amarillo's city center. As he paused to adjust a malfunctioning sprinkler head, he noticed what appeared to be an unusually bright star moving slowly across the eastern horizon. His initial assumption was that he was observing a satellite, possibly the International Space Station, which he had seen many times before during his evening work routines. However, as David continued to watch, the moving light began to behave in ways that contradicted his satellite explanation. The object appeared to be gradually increasing in both brightness and size, suggesting it was moving toward his position rather than following a typical orbital trajectory. Within approximately 5 minutes, what had initially appeared to be a distant point of light had grown to roughly the size of a basketball held at arm's length. David turned off his ATV's engine to eliminate any mechanical noise and stood in the silence of the Texas prairie, focusing his complete attention on the approaching object. As the object drew closer, David could distinguish specific structural details that definitively ruled out any conventional aircraft. Explanation: the craft appeared to be roughly cylindrical in shape, approximately 200 feet in length and perhaps 50 feet in diameter, with a metallic surface that reflected the starlight with an almost mirror-like quality. What struck David most immediately was the complete absence of any sound whatsoever. Living on a farm in rural Texas, David was accustomed to the profound silence of the countryside, broken only by occasional animal sounds or distant highway traffic. The approaching craft moved through the air with absolutely no engine noise, propeller wash, or jet exhaust sounds. The object's propulsion system appeared to be entirely unlike anything in David's experience with conventional aviation. Instead of visible engines, propellers, or jet exhausts, the craft seemed to generate a subtle distortion in the air around its perimeter, similar to the heat shimmer visible above hot pavement on summer days. This distortion effect created a wavering, almost liquid appearance around the edges of the craft, as if the air itself was being manipulated or displaced by some unknown force. David later described the effect as resembling the visual distortion created by looking through water or thick glass. As the craft approached to within approximately 300 feet of David's position, it began to slow dramatically before coming to a complete stop, hovering motionlessly about 100 feet above his wheat field. From this close distance, David could observe additional details of the object's construction. The surface appeared to be composed of a smooth, seamless material without visible joints, rivets, or panel lines that would typically be present on human-manufactured aircraft. The metallic surface had an unusual quality that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously, creating an almost luminescent effect in the starlight. Along the craft's perimeter, David noticed a series of small, regularly spaced openings or ports that emitted a soft, pulsing blue-white light. The pulsing pattern was rhythmic and consistent, with each pulse lasting approximately 2 seconds, followed by a 1-second interval of darkness. The light had an unusual quality that reminded David of LED technology, but with an intensity and color spectrum that seemed beyond current human manufacturing capabilities. The blue-white illumination cast an eerie glow across the wheat field below, creating long shadows that shifted and danced with each pulse cycle. David estimated that the craft remained stationary above his field for approximately 20 minutes, during which time he observed several remarkable phenomena. The wheat stalks directly beneath the hovering object appeared to be moving or swaying despite the complete absence of any wind. The movement was gentle and rhythmic, similar to the motion of underwater plants in a mild current. David also noticed that his ATV's digital displays, which had been functioning normally throughout the evening, began to flicker and display incorrect readings. The vehicle's GPS unit showed an error message, and the digital clock displayed random numbers that changed rapidly. During the encounter, David experienced several physiological effects that he had never encountered before. He felt a strange tingling sensation throughout his body, similar to the feeling of static electricity but much more pronounced. His vision seemed unusually sharp and clear, as if his eyesight had been enhanced beyond its normal capabilities. David also noticed that his sense of time seemed distorted. What felt like a few minutes of observation later proved to have lasted much longer when he checked his watch after the encounter ended. The craft's departure was as sudden and silent as its arrival had been gradual. Without any warning signs or preparation, the object simply accelerated upward at an incredible rate of speed. David estimated that the craft went from a stationary hover to complete disappearance in less than 3 seconds, reaching what must have been several thousand feet of altitude almost instantaneously. The acceleration was unlike anything he had ever witnessed, defying his understanding of physics and the limitations of conventional propulsion systems. Immediately after the craft disappeared, David noticed several lingering effects in the area where it had been hovering. The wheat stalks that had been moving beneath the object now stood completely motionless, but they appeared to have a slightly different coloration than the surrounding plants. The affected wheat had a subtle golden tint that was noticeably different from the normal green color of the healthy crop. David also observed that the ground directly beneath where the craft had hovered felt warmer to the touch than the surrounding soil, despite the cool evening air temperature. David drove his ATV back to his farmhouse in a state of profound confusion and excitement. His wife, Maria, immediately noticed his agitation and listened with growing concern as he described his encounter in detail. Maria had known David for over 25 years and had never known him to fabricate stories or seek attention through exaggeration. She was initially skeptical of his account, but David's obvious sincerity and the specific technical details he provided convinced her that he had indeed witnessed something extraordinary. The following morning, David returned to the field where the encounter had occurred to conduct a more thorough investigation in daylight. The area beneath where the craft had hovered showed clear evidence of some kind of unusual activity. The wheat stalks, in a roughly circular pattern, approximately 50 feet in diameter, displayed the golden coloration he had observed the previous evening, and the plants appeared to be growing at an accelerated rate compared to the surrounding crop. Within 2 weeks, the affected wheat stalks were noticeably taller and more robust than the rest of the field. David contacted the Mutual UFO Network MUFON to report his sighting and request an investigation. MUFON field investigator Dr. Patricia Williams conducted an extensive interview with David and performed soil and plant samples analysis from the affected area. The soil analysis revealed unusual mineral concentrations, including elevated levels of rare earth elements that are not typically found in Texas agricultural soil. The wheat samples showed enhanced chlorophyll production and cellular structure modifications that suggested exposure to some form of beneficial radiation or energy field. Dr. Williams also discovered that David's encounter had been corroborated by at least 3 other witnesses in the surrounding area. A rancher located approximately 5 miles southwest of David's farm had observed unusual lights in the sky during the same time period, and a truck driver traveling on Highway 287 had reported seeing a large, silent craft moving across the prairie. Additionally, the National Weather Service office in Amarillo had recorded unexplained electromagnetic anomalies in the area during the time of David's sighting. The encounter had lasting effects on David's farming operation and personal life. The wheat from the affected area of his field produced a harvest that was 40% larger than normal, with grain quality that exceeded all previous yields from that particular field. Agricultural extension agents from Texas A&M University were unable to explain the dramatic improvement in crop productivity. Despite conducting extensive soil and plant analysis, David began experimenting with different farming techniques in an attempt to replicate the beneficial effects he had observed, but without success. David's relationship with his local community became more complicated following news of his UFO encounter. While many of his neighbors and fellow farmers were supportive and interested in his experience, others were skeptical or dismissive. David found himself invited to speak at UFO research conferences and local civic organizations, but he generally declined these opportunities, preferring to maintain his privacy and focus on his farming operation. He did participate in several scientific studies of his encounter, hoping that his experience might contribute to a better understanding of the phenomena. The sighting also affected David's perspective on agriculture and environmental stewardship. He became more interested in sustainable farming practices and alternative energy sources, wondering if the technology demonstrated by the craft he observed might someday be applied to human agricultural and energy needs. David began researching advanced farming techniques and attending conferences on agricultural innovation, always hoping to learn about new technologies that might explain or replicate the beneficial effects he had witnessed. 3 years after his initial encounter, David experienced a brief follow-up sighting while working in the same field during evening irrigation duties. This time he observed a smaller object, roughly the size of a car, moving at high altitude across the night sky. The object displayed the same silent propulsion and unusual flight characteristics as the larger craft, but it remained at a much greater distance and was visible for only a few minutes before disappearing toward the north. Today, David continues to operate his family farm with renewed enthusiasm and curiosity about the possibilities of advanced agricultural technology. The wheat field, where his encounter occurred, continues to produce exceptional yields, and David has documented the long-term effects of his experience for ongoing scientific study. He has become an advocate for serious scientific investigation of UFO phenomena, arguing that such encounters might provide valuable insights into advanced technologies that could benefit human civilization. David's case has become one of the most well-documented and scientifically studied UFO encounters in Texas history, with physical evidence that continues to intrigue researchers and agricultural scientists. His experience demonstrates that UFO encounters can have positive, measurable effects on the environment, and suggests that these phenomena might be more beneficial than threatening. The enhanced productivity of his wheat field serves as ongoing evidence that his encounter was not merely a visual hallucination, but involved some form of advanced technology with practical applications for human agriculture and environmental improvement. Jennifer Walsh had been teaching 4th grade at Champlain Elementary School in Burlington, Vermont for 12 years when she experienced something that challenged her scientific training and rational approach to education. The 39-year-old educator held a master's degree in elementary education from the University of Vermont and had always emphasized critical thinking and evidence-based learning in her classroom. Jennifer grew up in rural Vermont, where she developed a deep appreciation for the natural world and astronomical phenomena. She was an amateur astronomer who regularly conducted stargazing sessions with her students, teaching them to identify constellations, planets, and various celestial objects visible in Vermont's remarkably clear night skies. On the evening of September the 14th, 2022, Jennifer was returning home from a parent-teacher conference at the school, driving north on Route 2 toward her small farmhouse in the hills outside Burlington. The conference had run later than expected, and it was approaching 10:30 p.m. as she navigated the winding country road that led to her home. The autumn air was crisp and clear, with temperatures in the low 50s and virtually no cloud cover, creating perfect conditions for astronomical observation. Jennifer had been looking forward to spending some time with her telescope that evening, as the new moon phase would provide optimal viewing conditions for deep sky objects. As she rounded a familiar curve near the Winooski River, Jennifer noticed unusual lights in her peripheral vision that appeared to be moving through the valley to her east. Her initial assumption was that she was observing aircraft from Burlington International Airport, which was located approximately 15 miles to the south. However, as she slowed her vehicle and pulled into a scenic overlook to get a better view, Jennifer realized that the lights were behaving in ways that contradicted conventional aircraft flight patterns. The lights appeared to be arranged in a perfect diamond formation, with 4 intensely bright white lights occupying the corners and a smaller red light positioned at the center. Each white light was roughly the size of a basketball when viewed from Jennifer's position, estimated to be about 2 miles away across the valley. The formation was moving slowly and silently from south to north, following the general contour of the Winooski River, but maintaining a consistent altitude of approximately 500 feet above the valley floor. What struck Jennifer as most unusual was the complete silence of the formation's movement. Living in rural Vermont, she was accustomed to hearing aircraft engines from considerable distances, especially during the quiet evening hours. The approaching lights produced absolutely no sound whatsoever, despite their relatively low altitude and proximity to her observation point. Jennifer had extensive experience identifying different types of aircraft through both visual and auditory cues, having lived near several military installations during her childhood when her father served in the Air National Guard. As the formation drew closer to her position, Jennifer could distinguish additional structural details that definitively ruled out conventional aircraft. The lights appeared to be attached to a single large object rather than representing separate vehicles in formation flight. Between the 4 corner lights, she could make out what appeared to be a solid triangular structure that blocked out stars in the night sky. The object appeared to be approximately 300 feet in length from nose to tail, with a wingspan of roughly 200 feet. The craft's surface had an unusual matte black appearance that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making it nearly invisible except where it blocked the background stars. Jennifer noticed that the edges of the craft appeared to have a subtle wavering or distortion effect, similar to heat shimmer, but much more pronounced. This distortion created an almost liquid appearance around the perimeter of the object, as if the air itself was being manipulated or displaced by some unknown technology. Jennifer reached for her cell phone to document what she was witnessing, but discovered that the device was completely unresponsive. The screen remained black, despite multiple attempts to power it on, and none of the buttons functioned normally. She tried starting her car to activate the dashboard camera she had installed for insurance purposes, but the vehicle's electrical system also appeared to be malfunctioning. The digital displays flickered erratically, and the engine would not turn over, despite the fact that it had been running normally just minutes before. As the craft approached to within approximately half a mile of Jennifer's position, it began to exhibit flight characteristics that defied her understanding of aerodynamics and physics. The object performed a series of perfectly executed 90-degree turns without any apparent deceleration or banking maneuvers. Each directional change was instantaneous and precise, as if the craft could alter its trajectory without regard for momentum or inertia. The formation of lights maintained their perfect geometric spacing throughout these maneuvers, suggesting that they were rigidly attached to a single structure rather than representing individual flying objects. During one of these directional changes, the craft oriented itself directly toward Jennifer's position and remained stationary for approximately 5 minutes. From this angle, she could observe the craft's frontal aspect, which appeared to be roughly triangular with a slightly rounded nose section. The 4 white lights were now arranged in a diamond pattern as viewed head-on, with the red center light pulsing in a slow, rhythmic pattern. Jennifer estimated that each pulse lasted approximately 3 seconds, followed by a 2-second interval of darkness. While the craft remained pointed in her direction, Jennifer experienced several unusual physiological effects. She felt a strange, tingling sensation throughout her body, similar to the feeling of static electricity, but much more intense. Her vision seemed unusually clear and sharp, as if her eyesight had been enhanced beyond its normal capabilities. Jennifer also noticed that her sense of time became distorted. What felt like a few minutes of observation later proved to have lasted much longer, according to her watch. The craft's departure was as remarkable as its arrival and hovering behavior. Without any visible preparation or gradual acceleration, the object simply vanished from its stationary position. Jennifer later described the departure as resembling a light being switched off rather than an object moving away at high speed. One moment the craft was clearly visible in front of her, and the next moment it had completely disappeared without any trace of movement or light trails. Immediately after the craft vanished, Jennifer's cell phone and car electrical system returned to normal operation. The phone displayed the correct time, and all functions operated normally, as if the previous malfunction had never occurred. Her car started immediately, and all dashboard displays showed normal readings. Jennifer drove directly to the Vermont State Police Barracks in Williston to report her sighting, arriving at approximately 11:45 p.m. Trooper Michael O'Brien, who took Jennifer's statement, was initially skeptical, but noted in his report that Walsh appeared coherent, sober, and genuinely distressed by her experience. He documented that Jennifer provided specific technical details about the craft's behavior and appearance that demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of aviation and physics principles. Trooper O'Brien also noted that Jennifer seemed reluctant to discuss the incident and appeared concerned about potential professional repercussions from reporting such an unusual experience. The following day, Jennifer contacted the National UFO Reporting Center, NUFORC, to file a detailed report of her encounter. NUFORC investigator Dr. Sarah Mitchell conducted an extensive telephone interview with Jennifer and was impressed by her scientific approach to documenting the experience. Dr. Mitchell noted that Jennifer's description included precise technical details and careful distinctions between observed facts and personal interpretations, indicating a trained scientific mindset. During the investigation process, Dr. Mitchell discovered that Jennifer's sighting had been corroborated by at least 2 other witnesses in the surrounding area. A family camping at Underhill State Park had observed unusual lights moving through the Winooski River Valley during the same time period, and a security guard at a manufacturing facility in Essex Junction had reported strange aerial activity in his logbook. Additionally, the Federal Aviation Administration confirmed that no conventional aircraft were scheduled to be operating in that airspace during the time of Jennifer's sighting. The encounter had significant effects on Jennifer's teaching career and personal life. As an educator who emphasized critical thinking and scientific methodology, she found herself struggling to reconcile what she had witnessed with her understanding of known technology and physics. She began incorporating more astronomy and critical thinking exercises into her curriculum, using her experience as a teaching tool to help students understand the importance of careful observation and evidence-based analysis. Jennifer's colleagues at Champlain Elementary were generally supportive of her account, particularly given her reputation for honesty and scientific rigor. Several fellow teachers became genuinely interested in her experience, and Jennifer found herself invited to speak at local science teacher conferences about the importance of maintaining scientific objectivity when confronted with unexplained phenomena. She emphasized to her audiences that experiencing something unusual should motivate increased scientific inquiry rather than abandoning critical thinking processes. The sighting also affected Jennifer's relationship with her family and the broader Burlington community. Her parents, both retired college professors, were initially concerned that she might be experiencing stress-related hallucinations from her demanding teaching schedule. However, Jennifer's consistent account and the corroborating witness reports convinced them that she had indeed experienced something extraordinary. Her story was eventually featured in a local newspaper article about UFO sightings in Vermont, which led to several additional witnesses coming forward with similar experiences. 6 months after her initial encounter, Jennifer experienced a brief follow-up sighting while conducting a nighttime astronomy session with her students at a school camping trip. She observed a single bright light moving in an erratic pattern across the constellation Orion, performing rapid directional changes that would be impossible for conventional aircraft. This second sighting lasted only a few minutes, but it reinforced Jennifer's conviction that she had witnessed genuine, unexplained aerial phenomena. Jennifer eventually became involved with the Vermont chapter of the Mutual UFO Network, contributing her scientific background and educational expertise to the organization's investigation and documentation efforts. She helped develop protocols for interviewing child witnesses and created educational materials to help distinguish between conventional aircraft and potentially unusual phenomena. Her teaching experience proved valuable in helping other witnesses organize and communicate their experiences effectively. The encounter fundamentally changed Jennifer's perspective on the nature of scientific inquiry and the importance of remaining open to possibilities beyond current understanding. While she continued to emphasize critical thinking and evidence-based analysis in her teaching, she also began incorporating discussions about the limits of human knowledge and the importance of maintaining intellectual humility when confronted with unexplained phenomena. Today, Jennifer continues her work as an elementary school teacher, while maintaining her involvement in UFO research as a serious scientific endeavor. She has become an advocate for encouraging students and educators to report unusual observations without fear of ridicule, arguing that scientific progress depends on honest documentation of unexplained phenomena. Her case has been featured in several academic studies of UFO witness credibility, and her detailed documentation continues to serve as a model for other investigators. Jennifer's experience demonstrates that UFO encounters can occur to highly educated, scientifically trained individuals who are capable of providing detailed, credible accounts of their observations. Her careful documentation and scientific approach to analyzing her experience have contributed valuable data to the ongoing study of unexplained aerial phenomena, while her work as an educator helps ensure that future generations will be better equipped to observe and analyze unusual phenomena with appropriate scientific rigor and intellectual honesty. Michael O'Brien had been making his living from the Atlantic Ocean for over 20 years when he encountered something that challenged his understanding of both the sea and the sky above it. The 51-year-old fisherman had grown up in Bar Harbor, Maine, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather, who had worked these same waters for generations. Michael owned and operated the Sarah's Pride, a 38-foot lobster boat that he had purchased and meticulously maintained for 15 years. His daily routine involved checking over 400 lobster traps scattered across a 40-square-mile area of ocean between Mount Desert Island and the outer islands of Frenchman Bay. On the morning of June 8, 2023, Michael departed Bar Harbor's Municipal Wharf at 4:30 a.m. for what he expected to be a routine day of checking and resetting his traps. The weather conditions were nearly perfect, with calm seas, clear skies, and light winds from the southwest at around 8 knots. Visibility was exceptional, extending well beyond the horizon, and the early morning light was just beginning to illuminate the distinctive granite peaks of Acadia National Park along the nearby coastline. Michael had been working these waters long enough to know every ledge, every current pattern, and every seasonal change in the behavior of both lobsters and the various species of fish that inhabited the Gulf of Maine. By 6:15 a.m., Michael was working his outermost string of traps, located approximately 12 miles southeast of Bar Harbor, in water depths ranging from 180 to 220 feet. He had just hauled his 43rd trap of the morning and was in the process of removing 2 keeper-sized lobsters when he noticed something unusual on the horizon to the east. At first, he assumed it was another fishing vessel heading out to check traps in the deeper waters beyond the continental shelf. However, as Michael continued his work, he realized that the distant object was not behaving like any boat he had ever observed. The object appeared to be hovering motionless above the water's surface at what Michael estimated to be a height of approximately 200 feet. From his distance of roughly 4 miles, the object appeared to be roughly the size of a school bus, with a distinctly metallic appearance that reflected the early morning sunlight with unusual intensity. What struck Michael as most peculiar was the complete absence of any visible means of support or propulsion. There were no rotors like a helicopter, no wings like an airplane, and no exhaust trails like a jet aircraft. Michael reached for the marine binoculars he kept in his wheelhouse and focused them on the mysterious object. Through the powerful optics, he could see that the craft had a smooth, seamless surface with what appeared to be a slightly oval or disc-like shape. The metallic surface had an almost mirror-like quality that seemed to shift and change color slightly as it reflected the surrounding environment. Along the perimeter of the object, Michael could make out what appeared to be a series of small ports or openings that emitted a soft, pulsing blue light. As Michael continued to observe through his binoculars, the object began to move in ways that defied his understanding of conventional aircraft or watercraft. It performed a series of perfectly executed maneuvers, including instantaneous directional changes and rapid acceleration, followed by complete stops. The craft moved from its hovering position to a point approximately 2 miles closer to Michael's boat in what appeared to be less than 5 seconds, covering the distance without any visible transition or acceleration phase. During these maneuvers, Michael noticed that the water beneath the craft appeared to be disturbed in an unusual pattern. Instead of the typical wake or wash that would be created by conventional aircraft flying at low altitude. The water surface showed a perfectly circular area of disturbance, approximately 100 feet in diameter. The water within this circle appeared to be moving in a slow counterclockwise rotation, creating a subtle whirlpool effect that was clearly visible even from Michael's distance of several miles. Growing increasingly concerned about what he was witnessing, Michael reached for his VHF radio to contact the U.S. Coast Guard station in Southwest Harbor. However, when he attempted to transmit, he discovered that his radio was producing only static and was unable to establish communication with any other vessels or shore stations. His GPS unit was also malfunctioning, displaying error messages and incorrect position readings despite having worked perfectly just minutes before. The craft remained in its new position for approximately 10 minutes, during which time Michael observed several additional phenomena that he had never experienced in his decades of fishing. The normal sounds of the ocean, the lapping of waves against his boat's hull, the cry of seagulls, and the distant rumble of other fishing vessels became strangely muted, as if he were observing the scene from inside a soundproof enclosure. The air temperature around his boat also seemed to drop noticeably, despite the clear morning sunshine and lack of wind. Michael also experienced unusual physiological effects during the encounter. He felt a strange tingling sensation throughout his body, similar to the feeling of static electricity but much more pronounced. His vision seemed unusually sharp and clear, allowing him to observe details of the distant craft that should have been impossible to see at such range, even with binoculars. He also noticed that his sense of time seemed distorted, with minutes feeling like hours as he watched the motionless craft. Without any warning, the object began to rise vertically from its position above the water. Michael watched through his binoculars as the craft ascended at what appeared to be an incredible rate of speed, reaching an altitude where it became just a small point of light in approximately 15 seconds. As the object climbed, the circular disturbance in the water below gradually subsided, and the normal sounds of the ocean environment returned to normal levels. Immediately after the craft disappeared from sight, Michael's electronic equipment returned to normal operation. His VHF radio resumed normal function, and he was able to establish contact with other fishing vessels in the area. His GPS unit also began displaying correct position readings and responding normally to inputs. Michael immediately contacted the Coast Guard to report his sighting, providing detailed coordinates of where the encounter had occurred. Petty Officer Second Class Jessica Martinez, who took Michael's initial report, noted in her log that O'Brien appeared genuinely shaken by his experience, but provided coherent and detailed information about what he had witnessed. She also documented that Michael had been a licensed commercial fisherman for over 20 years, with no history of filing false reports or engaging in attention-seeking behavior. The Coast Guard conducted a search of the area where Michael reported the sighting, but found no evidence of any conventional aircraft or watercraft that might explain his observation. The encounter had lasting effects on Michael's fishing operation and personal life. He began paying much closer attention to unusual phenomena during his daily trips, carrying a waterproof camera to document anything unusual he might encounter. 3 weeks after his initial sighting, Michael observed unusual lights moving beneath the water surface while working traps in the same general area. The lights appeared to be traveling at high speed and maintaining a consistent depth of approximately 50 feet below the surface, too deep and too fast to be explained by any known marine life or human technology. Michael eventually contacted the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, to file a detailed report of his encounter. MUFON maritime investigator Dr. Robert Hayes conducted an extensive interview with Michael and was impressed by his detailed knowledge of marine conditions and his ability to distinguish between normal and abnormal phenomena at sea. Dr. Hayes noted that Michael's description of the craft's interaction with the water surface was consistent with other maritime UFO encounters, suggesting some form of advanced propulsion system that could affect both air and water. The investigation revealed that Michael's sighting had been corroborated by at least one other witness. A recreational sailor who had been anchored near Egg Rock during the same time period reported seeing unusual lights and aircraft behavior in the distance, though his account was less detailed due to the greater distance from the phenomenon. Additionally, radar operators at Bangor International Airport confirmed they had tracked an unidentified target in the general area during the time frame of Michael's sighting, though the object had displayed flight characteristics inconsistent with known aircraft. Today, Michael continues his lobster fishing operation while maintaining a heightened awareness of unusual phenomena during his time at sea. He has become involved with a network of commercial fishermen who document and share reports of unusual oceanic and aerial encounters. His case has been featured in several maritime UFO studies and continues to contribute valuable data to researchers studying the intersection between UFO phenomena and marine environments. The encounter reinforced Michael's respect for the mysteries of the ocean and expanded his appreciation for the possibility that advanced technologies, whether terrestrial or otherwise, may be operating in environments previously thought to be well understood by human science. Ashley Johnson had been a junior at the University of Wisconsin-Madison for 3 years, majoring in astrophysics and working toward her bachelor's degree when she experienced something that would profoundly impact both her academic studies and her understanding of the universe. The 21-year-old had grown up on a dairy farm outside Madison, where her parents, Robert and Susan Johnson, had raised her with a deep appreciation for science, critical thinking, and the natural world. Ashley had been fascinated by astronomy since childhood, spending countless nights observing the stars with a telescope her grandfather had given her for her 13th birthday. On the evening of November 2nd, 2024, Ashley was driving back to campus from her part-time job at the university's Space Science and Engineering Center, where she worked as a research assistant analyzing data from NASA's various satellite missions. The drive from the research facility to her dormitory typically took about 25 minutes along Highway 14, a route that wound through the rolling farmland and small communities surrounding Madison. Ashley had made this drive hundreds of times during her 3 years at the university, and she was intimately familiar with every curve, hill, and landmark along the way. The night was exceptionally clear and cold, with temperatures hovering around 28 degrees Fahrenheit and virtually no cloud cover, creating perfect conditions for astronomical observation. Ashley had been looking forward to spending some time with her telescope that evening, as the new moon phase would provide optimal viewing conditions for faint, deep sky objects. She had been particularly excited about attempting to photograph the Andromeda Galaxy using a new camera attachment she had recently purchased for her telescope. As she drove through the small farming community of Cross Plains, approximately 15 miles west of Madison, Ashley noticed unusual lights in her peripheral vision that appeared to be moving through the sky to her north. Her initial assumption was that she was observing aircraft from the nearby Dane County Regional Airport, but as she slowed her vehicle and pulled into the parking lot of a closed farm equipment dealership to get a better view, Ashley realized that the lights were behaving in ways that contradicted everything she had learned about conventional aviation and physics during her astrophysics studies. The lights appeared to be arranged in a perfect hexagonal formation, with 6 intensely bright white lights positioned at equal distances around the perimeter and a larger pulsing red light located at the center. Each white light was roughly the size of a car's headlight when viewed from Ashley's estimated distance of approximately 2 miles. The formation was moving slowly and silently from west to east, maintaining a consistent altitude that Ashley estimated to be around 1,000 feet above the surrounding farmland. What struck Ashley as most remarkable was the complete absence of any sound whatsoever from the formation. During her 3 years of astrophysics study, she had learned extensively about aircraft propulsion systems, and she knew that any conventional aircraft operating at such low altitude would produce significant engine noise that would be easily audible from her observation point. The approaching lights produced absolutely no detectable sound, despite the quiet rural environment that would normally amplify even distant mechanical noises. As the formation drew closer to her position, Ashley could distinguish additional structural details that definitively ruled out conventional aircraft or any known atmospheric phenomena. The lights appeared to be attached to a single massive object rather than representing separate vehicles in formation flight. Between the 6 perimeter lights, she could make out what appeared to be a solid hexagonal structure that blocked out stars in the night sky. The object appeared to be approximately 400 feet in diameter, making it larger than any known military or civilian aircraft. The craft's surface had an unusual dark metallic appearance that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making it nearly invisible except where it blocked the background stars. Ashley noticed that the edges of the craft appeared to have a subtle wavering or distortion effect, similar to heat shimmer, but much more pronounced and clearly visible in the cold night air. This distortion created an almost liquid appearance around the perimeter of the object, as if the air itself was being manipulated or displaced by some form of advanced propulsion technology. Ashley reached for her cell phone to document what she was witnessing, but discovered that the device was completely unresponsive. The screen remained black despite multiple attempts to power it on, and none of the buttons functioned normally. She also tried starting her car to activate the dashboard camera she used for documenting atmospheric phenomena for her research work, but her vehicle's electrical system appeared to be malfunctioning. The digital displays flickered erratically, showing random numbers and symbols, and the engine would not turn over despite having been running normally just minutes before. As the craft approached to within approximately half a mile of Ashley's position, it began to exhibit flight characteristics that challenged her understanding of physics and aerodynamics. The object performed a series of perfectly executed maneuvers, including instantaneous 90-degree turns without any apparent deceleration or banking movements. Each directional change was immediate and precise, as if the craft could alter its trajectory without regard for momentum, inertia, or the laws of motion that governed conventional aircraft. During one of these maneuvers, the craft oriented itself directly toward Ashley's position and remained stationary for approximately 8 minutes. From this angle, she could observe the craft's frontal aspect, which appeared to be perfectly hexagonal with slightly curved edges. The 6 white lights were now arranged in their hexagonal pattern as viewed head-on, while the red center light pulsed in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. Ashley timed the pulsing pattern and noted that each pulse lasted exactly 4 seconds, followed by a 3-second interval of darkness, suggesting some form of controlled technological origin rather than natural phenomena. While the craft remained pointed in her direction, Ashley experienced several unusual physiological and environmental effects. She felt a strange tingling sensation throughout her body, accompanied by what she later described as a feeling of heightened awareness and mental clarity. Her vision seemed unusually sharp and detailed, allowing her to observe aspects of the craft that should have been impossible to see at such distance. Ashley also noticed that the normal sounds of the rural environment, wind through trees, distant highway traffic, and animal noises, became completely silent, as if she were observing the scene from within a soundproof enclosure. The temperature around Ashley's location also seemed to change dramatically during the encounter. Despite the cold November air, she felt warm and comfortable, as if the craft was generating some form of thermal field that extended to her observation point. When she removed her heavy winter jacket, she found that the air immediately around her vehicle felt at least 20 degrees warmer than the surrounding environment. The craft's departure was as sudden and remarkable as its arrival had been gradual. Without any visible preparation or warning signs, the object simply accelerated upward at an incredible rate of speed. Ashley watched as the hexagonal craft went from a stationary hover to complete disappearance in what she estimated to be less than 4 seconds, reaching an altitude where it became invisible to the naked eye almost instantaneously. The acceleration was unlike anything she had studied in her physics courses, appearing to violate fundamental laws regarding mass, energy, and propulsion. Immediately after the craft vanished, Ashley's cell phone and car electrical system returned to normal operation. The phone displayed the correct time, and all functions operated normally, as if the previous malfunction had never occurred. Her car started immediately, and all dashboard displays showed normal readings. Ashley drove directly to the University of Wisconsin Police Department to report her sighting. Arriving at approximately 10:15 p.m., Officer David Hansen, who took Ashley's statement, was initially skeptical, but noted in his report that Johnson appeared coherent, scientifically knowledgeable, and genuinely distressed by her experience. He documented that Ashley provided specific technical details about the craft's behavior and appearance that demonstrated her sophisticated understanding of physics and aviation principles. Officer Hansen also noted that Ashley seemed reluctant to discuss the incident publicly and appeared concerned about potential academic repercussions from reporting such an unusual experience. The following day, Ashley contacted her faculty advisor, Dr. Margaret Chen, professor of astrophysics at UW-Madison, to discuss her encounter. Dr. Chen was initially concerned that Ashley might be experiencing stress-related hallucinations from her demanding academic schedule, but Ashley's consistent account and detailed technical observations convinced her that something extraordinary had occurred. Dr. Chen helped Ashley contact the National UFO Reporting Center, NUFORC, to file a detailed scientific report of her encounter. NUFORC investigator Dr. Michael Stevens conducted an extensive interview with Ashley and was impressed by her scientific approach to documenting the experience. Dr. Stevens noted that Ashley's description included precise technical details, careful measurements, and systematic observations that indicated advanced scientific training. Her ability to distinguish between observed facts and personal interpretations demonstrated the kind of analytical thinking that made her account particularly credible. During the investigation process, Dr. Stevens discovered that Ashley's sighting had been corroborated by multiple other witnesses in the surrounding area. A farm family located approximately 3 miles southeast of Ashley's observation point had also observed unusual lights in the sky during the same time period, and a Wisconsin State Patrol officer had noted strange aerial activity in his log while patrolling Highway 14. Additionally, the Federal Aviation Administration confirmed that no conventional aircraft were scheduled to be operating in that airspace during the time of Ashley's sighting. The encounter had significant effects on Ashley's academic studies and career plans. She began incorporating her UFO research into her astrophysics coursework, writing her senior thesis on the theoretical physics of advanced propulsion systems and their potential applications to unexplained aerial phenomena. Her professors were initially skeptical, but became increasingly interested as Ashley presented detailed technical analysis of propulsion methods that could theoretically explain the flight characteristics she had observed. Ashley's case eventually became the subject of a joint study between the University of Wisconsin's physics and psychology departments, examining the reliability of scientific observations made during high-stress encounters with unexplained phenomena. Her detailed documentation and scientific background made her account valuable for researchers studying the intersection between UFO encounters and academic credibility. Today, Ashley continues her graduate studies in astrophysics while maintaining her involvement in UFO research as a serious scientific endeavor. She has become an advocate for encouraging scientists and students to report unusual observations without fear of academic ridicule, arguing that scientific progress depends on honest documentation of unexplained phenomena. Her case has contributed valuable data to ongoing studies of UFO encounters among scientifically trained witnesses, and her detailed technical analysis continues to influence theoretical research into advanced propulsion technologies. Robert Kim had been working as a senior software engineer for a major tech company in San Jose, California, for nearly 8 years, when he encountered something that challenged both his technical expertise and his understanding of what was possible in the world of advanced technology. The 35-year-old had earned his master's degree in computer science from Stanford University and specialized in developing artificial intelligence algorithms for autonomous vehicle navigation systems. Robert's work required him to understand complex sensor technologies, radar systems, and optical recognition equipment, giving him extensive knowledge of how various detection and measurement devices functioned under different environmental conditions. On the evening of March 18, 2023, Robert was driving home from a late-night debugging session at his company's headquarters in Silicon Valley, traveling north on Highway 101 toward his apartment in Mountain View. The debugging session had been particularly challenging, involving a complex issue with LiDAR sensor integration that had required nearly 12 hours of continuous work. Robert was mentally exhausted but also satisfied with the breakthrough his team had achieved in solving what had been a persistent problem for several weeks. The time was approximately 1:45 a.m. as Robert navigated the relatively light traffic on the normally congested freeway. The weather conditions were unusually clear for the Bay Area, with minimal fog and excellent visibility extending well beyond the South Bay Hills. As someone who had grown up in the region, Robert was accustomed to the typical marine layer that often obscured visibility during nighttime hours, so he was appreciating the clear conditions that allowed him to see the familiar landmarks of Silicon Valley spread out around him. As he approached the exit for the Moffett Federal Airfield, Robert noticed unusual lights in his peripheral vision that appeared to be moving through the sky to his west in the direction of San Francisco Bay. His initial assumption was that he was observing aircraft from either Moffett Field or nearby San Jose International Airport. But as he focused his attention on the lights, Robert realized they were exhibiting flight patterns that contradicted everything he knew about conventional aviation and autonomous vehicle navigation systems. The lights appeared to be arranged in a perfect octagonal formation, with 8 intensely bright blue-white lights positioned at equal intervals around the perimeter, and a larger pulsing amber light located at the center. Each perimeter light was roughly the size of a car's headlight when viewed from Robert's estimated distance of approximately 3 miles. The formation was moving in a complex pattern that included sudden directional changes, rapid acceleration and deceleration cycles, and periods of complete motionless hovering. What struck Robert as most remarkable from his professional perspective was the precision and coordination of the formation's movements. As someone who worked extensively with autonomous navigation algorithms, he immediately recognized that the level of coordination being displayed would require incredibly sophisticated computer processing and sensor integration. The 8 perimeter lights maintained their perfect geometric spacing throughout every maneuver, suggesting a level of real-time position calculation and adjustment that exceeded anything in his experience with current autonomous vehicle technology. Robert pulled his car over to the shoulder of Highway 101 and activated his hazard lights so he could observe the phenomenon more carefully. From his stationary position, he could see that the formation was performing maneuvers that would be impossible for conventional aircraft. The entire octagonal structure would instantaneously rotate around its center axis while simultaneously moving in complex 3-dimensional patterns through the airspace above the bay. The precision of these movements was unlike anything Robert had seen in his years of working with autonomous navigation systems. As the formation drew closer to his position, Robert could distinguish additional structural details that ruled out conventional aircraft or drone technology. The lights appeared to be attached to a single large object, rather than representing separate vehicles in formation flight. Between the 8 perimeter lights, he could make out what appeared to be a solid octagonal structure that had a metallic surface with an unusual reflective quality. The object appeared to be approximately 500 feet in diameter, making it larger than any known military or civilian aircraft. Robert reached for his smartphone to document what he was witnessing, having learned from his work experience to always record unusual technical phenomena for later analysis. However, when he attempted to activate the camera function, he discovered that his phone was exhibiting behavior he had never encountered before. The device appeared to be functioning normally, with all applications responding to touch commands, but the camera would not focus properly on the aerial phenomenon. Every time he attempted to photograph or video the formation, the camera's autofocus system would continuously search without ever achieving a clear image, despite the excellent ambient lighting conditions. As someone with extensive experience in optical recognition systems, Robert found this camera malfunction particularly intriguing. He had worked with similar autofocus algorithms in his autonomous vehicle projects, and understood that the continuous focus searching indicated that the camera's processor was unable to calculate proper distance measurements to the target object. This suggested that the formation might be generating some form of optical interference that was confusing the phone's focus calculation algorithms. The formation remained visible for approximately 25 minutes, during which time Robert observed several additional phenomena that challenged his understanding of current technology capabilities. The octagonal structure would periodically become completely transparent, allowing him to see stars through what had previously appeared to be a solid metallic surface. This transparency effect would last for 30 to 60 seconds before the structure would again become opaque and visible. Robert had never encountered any material technology that could achieve such controlled transparency effects. During the encounter, Robert also noticed unusual electromagnetic effects on his vehicle's electronic systems. His car's GPS navigation unit began displaying incorrect position readings, showing his location as being several miles from his actual position on Highway 101. The satellite radio also experienced significant interference, cycling through static and completely different radio stations without any input from Robert. These effects were consistent with what he knew about electromagnetic pulse phenomena, but at a much lower intensity level that suggested sophisticated control rather than random interference. The formation's departure was as technically impressive as its extended display had been. The 8 perimeter lights began pulsing in a synchronized pattern that Robert timed at exactly 1.3-second intervals. As the pulsing accelerated, the entire octagonal structure began to climb vertically at an increasing rate of speed. Robert estimated that the formation went from hovering at approximately 2,000 feet to complete disappearance beyond visual range in less than 8 seconds, suggesting acceleration capabilities far beyond anything he knew to be possible with current propulsion technology. Immediately after the formation disappeared, all of Robert's electronic devices returned to normal operation. His smartphone camera focused properly on distant objects, his GPS navigation displayed correct position readings, and his satellite radio returned to normal reception. The sudden return to normal functionality was as puzzling to Robert as the initial interference had been, suggesting some form of controlled electromagnetic field that could be activated and deactivated at will. Robert drove directly to the Mountain View Police Department to report his sighting. Arriving at approximately 2:30 a.m., Officer Jennifer Martinez, who took his statement, was initially skeptical, but noted in her report that Kim demonstrated extensive technical knowledge. and provided detailed scientific observations about the encounter. She also documented that Robert seemed more interested in understanding the technical aspects of what he had witnessed than in seeking attention or publicity for his experience. The following day, Robert contacted his colleague Dr. Patricia Wong, a professor of aerospace engineering at Stanford University, to discuss his encounter from a technical perspective. Dr. Wong was initially skeptical of Robert's account, but became increasingly interested as he described the precise technical details of the formation's behavior and the electromagnetic effects he had observed. She helped him contact the National UFO Reporting Center, NUFORC, to file a detailed technical report of his encounter. NUFORC investigator Dr. Michael Stevens conducted an extensive interview with Robert and was impressed by his systematic approach to analyzing the experience. Dr. Stevens noted that Robert's technical background allowed him to provide unusually detailed and scientifically valuable observations about advanced flight characteristics and electromagnetic effects. Robert's ability to distinguish between observed phenomena and personal interpretations made his account particularly credible from a scientific research perspective. The investigation revealed that Robert's sighting had been corroborated by at least 3 other witnesses in the South Bay area. A security guard at Moffett Field had also observed unusual lights over San Francisco Bay during the same time period, and 2 other drivers on Highway 101 had contacted California Highway Patrol to report strange aerial activity. Additionally, air traffic control radar at San Jose International Airport had tracked an unidentified target exhibiting unusual flight characteristics in the area during the time of Robert's sighting. The encounter had significant effects on Robert's career and personal interests. He began incorporating his UFO research into his professional work, investigating whether advanced autonomous navigation algorithms might be developed based on the coordination patterns he had observed. Robert also started collaborating with other engineers and computer scientists who had reported similar encounters, forming an informal research group focused on reverse engineering the technical aspects of UFO technology. Robert's case eventually became the subject of academic study at several universities, with researchers examining how technical professionals analyze and document encounters with unexplained phenomena. His detailed technical observations and systematic approach to data collection made his account valuable for scientists studying the intersection between UFO encounters and advanced technology development. Today, Robert continues his work as a software engineer while maintaining his involvement in UFO research as a technical investigation discipline. He has become an advocate for encouraging other technology professionals to report unusual observations and to apply their technical expertise to analyzing unexplained phenomena. His case has contributed valuable technical data to ongoing studies of UFO flight characteristics and electromagnetic effects, and his systematic approach to documentation continues to influence how technical professionals investigate and report unusual encounters. Robert's experience demonstrates that UFO encounters can provide valuable technical insights for professionals working with advanced navigation and sensor technologies. His detailed analysis of the formation's coordination patterns and electromagnetic effects has influenced research into advanced autonomous systems and has suggested new approaches to solving complex technical challenges in artificial intelligence and aerospace engineering. The encounter reinforced Robert's appreciation for the possibilities that advanced technology might offer, while expanding his understanding of what might be achievable beyond current human technological capabilities. Maria Gonzalez had been working the night shift as a waitress at the Silver Dollar Diner in Albuquerque, New Mexico for 6 years, when she encountered something that would forever change her perspective on what was possible in the high desert skies of the American Southwest. The 28-year-old had grown up in a military family with her father serving as a master sergeant at Kirtland Air Force Base, which had given her extensive knowledge of military aircraft and their flight characteristics. Maria could identify virtually any conventional aircraft by sight and sound, from F-16 Fighting Falcons to C-130, Hercules transport planes to the occasional B-2 Spirit bomber that operated from nearby bases. On the morning of August 7th, 2022, Maria was driving home from her shift at the diner, traveling east on Central Avenue toward her small apartment in the foothills of the Sandia Mountains. The shift had been busier than usual due to a late-night influx of travelers from Interstate 40, and Maria was looking forward to getting some rest before her afternoon classes at the University of New Mexico, where she was studying criminal justice. The time was approximately 4:15 a.m., and the pre-dawn air was cool and clear, with excellent visibility extending across the Rio Grande Valley to the volcanic escarpment on the western horizon. As she drove through the largely empty streets of Albuquerque's northeast heights, Maria noticed unusual lights in her peripheral vision that appeared to be moving through the sky to her north, in the direction of the Sandia Mountains. Her initial assumption was that she was observing military aircraft from Kirtland Air Force Base, conducting early morning training exercises, which was not uncommon in the area. However, as she pulled into the parking lot of a closed gas station to get a better view, Maria realized that the lights were exhibiting flight patterns that contradicted everything she had learned about military aviation during her childhood on the airbase. The lights appeared to be arranged in a perfect triangular formation with 3 intensely bright white lights positioned at the corners and a smaller pulsing red light located at the center. Each corner light was roughly the size of a car's headlight when viewed from Maria's estimated distance of approximately 2 miles. The formation was moving slowly and silently from west to east, following the general contour of the Sandia Mountains, while maintaining a consistent altitude that Maria estimated to be around 3,000 feet above the valley floor. What struck Maria as most unusual was the complete absence of any engine noise from the formation. Having grown up on an Air Force base, she was intimately familiar with the sound signatures of various military aircraft, and she knew that any conventional aircraft operating at such relatively low altitude would produce significant engine noise that would be easily audible in the quiet pre-dawn environment. The formation produced absolutely no detectable sound, despite its proximity to her observation point and the lack of ambient noise in the sleeping city. As the formation drew closer to her position, Maria could distinguish additional details that ruled out conventional military aircraft. The lights appeared to be attached to a single large triangular object, rather than representing 3 separate aircraft in formation flight. Between the 3 corner lights, she could make out what appeared to be a solid structure that had a dark non-reflective surface that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The object appeared to be approximately 200 feet from tip to tip, making it larger than most military fighter aircraft, but smaller than strategic bombers or transport planes. The craft's surface had an unusual matte black appearance that made it nearly invisible against the pre-dawn sky, except where it blocked out the background stars. Maria noticed that the edges of the triangular structure appeared to have a subtle shimmering or wavering effect, similar to heat distortion, but clearly visible in the cool morning air. This optical distortion created an almost liquid appearance around the perimeter of the object, as if the air itself was being displaced or manipulated by some unknown technology. Maria reached for her cell phone to document what she was witnessing, but discovered that the device was exhibiting unusual behavior. The phone appeared to be functioning normally in all respects, except that the camera application would not respond properly to her commands. Every time she attempted to take a photograph or video of the triangular formation, the camera would focus on foreground objects like the gas station building or her car's interior, but would not focus on the aerial phenomenon despite the excellent lighting conditions provided by the city's ambient illumination. As the formation approached to within approximately 1 mile of Maria's position, it began to exhibit flight characteristics that challenged her understanding of aerodynamics and military aviation capabilities. The triangular object performed a series of perfectly executed maneuvers, including instantaneous directional changes without any visible banking or turning movements. The craft would move from traveling in one direction to traveling in a completely different direction without any apparent transition period, as if it could ignore the physical laws of momentum and inertia that governed conventional aircraft. During one of these maneuvers, the triangular craft oriented itself directly toward Maria's position and remained stationary for approximately 12 minutes. From this head-on angle, she could observe that the three corner lights were arranged in a perfect equilateral triangle while the red center light pulsed in a slow rhythmic pattern. Maria timed the pulsing sequence and noted that each pulse lasted exactly 3 seconds, followed by a 2-second interval of darkness, suggesting some form of controlled technological origin rather than natural atmospheric phenomena. While the craft remained pointed in her direction, Maria experienced several unusual effects that she had never encountered before. She felt a strange sense of calm and mental clarity, as if her normal anxieties and concerns had temporarily disappeared. Her vision seemed unusually sharp and detailed, allowing her to observe aspects of the triangular craft that should have been difficult to see at such distance. Maria also noticed that the normal sounds of the urban environment, distant highway traffic, air conditioning units, and early morning bird activity became completely silent, as if she were experiencing the scene from within a soundproof enclosure. The ambient temperature around Maria's location also seemed to change during the encounter. Despite the cool August morning air, she felt unusually warm and comfortable, as if the craft was generating some form of thermal field that extended to her observation point. When she removed her light jacket, she found that the air immediately around her felt at least 15 degrees warmer than it should have been at that time of morning. The craft's departure was as remarkable as its extended display had been. Without any visible preparation or gradual acceleration, the triangular object simply accelerated upward and eastward at an incredible rate of speed. Maria watched as the craft went from a stationary hover to complete disappearance beyond the Sandia Mountains in what she estimated to be less than 6 seconds. The acceleration was unlike anything she had observed during her years of watching military aircraft operations from Kirtland Air Force Base. Immediately after the craft disappeared, Maria's cell phone camera returned to normal operation, focusing properly on distant objects and responding normally to all commands. She drove directly to the Albuquerque Police Department's Northeast Area Command to report her sighting, arriving at approximately 5:10 a.m. Officer David Rodriguez, who took her statement, noted in his report that Gonzalez appeared coherent and knowledgeable about military aviation, and that her account included specific technical details that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of aircraft behavior and flight characteristics. The following day, Maria contacted her father, Master Sergeant Carlos Gonzalez, to discuss her encounter. Her father was initially skeptical, but became more interested when Maria described the specific flight maneuvers and characteristics she had observed. As someone with over 20 years of military aviation experience, he acknowledged that the behavior she described was beyond the capabilities of any known aircraft in the Air Force inventory, including classified experimental programs he was aware of. Maria eventually contacted the National UFO Reporting Center, NUFORC, to file a detailed report of her encounter. NUFORC investigator Dr. Susan Mitchell conducted an extensive interview with Maria and was impressed by her systematic approach to documenting the experience. Dr. Mitchell noted that Maria's military background and familiarity with aviation technology allowed her to provide unusually detailed and technically accurate observations about the craft's behavior and flight characteristics. During the investigation, Dr. Mitchell discovered that Maria's sighting had been corroborated by at least 2 other witnesses in the Albuquerque area. A security guard at a nearby office complex had also observed unusual triangular lights in the sky during the same time period, and a truck driver traveling on Interstate 40 had reported strange aerial activity to the New Mexico State Police. Additionally, air traffic control radar at Albuquerque International Sunport had recorded an unidentified target exhibiting unusual flight characteristics in the area during the time of Maria's sighting. The encounter had significant effects on Maria's academic studies and career goals. She began incorporating UFO research into her criminal justice coursework, writing papers about the legal and investigative aspects of documenting unexplained phenomena. Her professors were initially skeptical, but became increasingly interested as Maria presented detailed case studies and analysis of witness testimony credibility in UFO encounters. Today, Maria continues her studies while working part-time to support herself, but she has also become involved with local UFO research organizations and serves as a liaison between civilian researchers and military personnel who have had similar experiences. Her case has contributed valuable data to ongoing studies of triangular UFO sightings in military areas, and her detailed documentation continues to serve as a model for other witnesses from military backgrounds. The encounter reinforced Maria's appreciation for the mysteries that exist beyond current military technology, while expanding her understanding of the need for serious scientific investigation of unexplained aerial phenomena. Christopher Lee had been working as an automotive mechanic at Morrison's Auto Repair in Birmingham, Alabama, for nearly 14 years when he encountered something that challenged his practical understanding of mechanical engineering and propulsion systems. The 42-year-old had grown up in rural Alabama, where his father and grandfather had taught him to repair everything from farm tractors to classic automobiles, using nothing but basic tools and common sense. Christopher possessed an intuitive understanding of how machines worked, whether they involved internal combustion engines, hydraulic systems, or electrical components. His expertise with mechanical systems had made him one of the most sought-after mechanics in Jefferson County, capable of diagnosing and repairing problems that stumped other technicians. On the evening of May 15th, 2021, Christopher was driving home from a particularly challenging repair job at a customer's house in the suburbs south of Birmingham, traveling north on Highway 31 toward his small apartment in the Avondale neighborhood. The repair had involved rebuilding the transmission on a 1967 Mustang, work that had required nearly 10 hours of careful disassembly and precision adjustment. Christopher was physically exhausted, but mentally satisfied with the successful completion of what many mechanics would have considered an impossible restoration project. The time was approximately 9:30 p.m. as Christopher navigated through the light Saturday evening traffic, looking forward to spending a quiet night at home working on his own project car, a 1970 Plymouth Barracuda that he had been restoring for the past 3 years. The weather conditions were ideal for the late spring season, with clear skies, mild temperatures in the mid-70s, and excellent visibility extending across the rolling hills of central Alabama. Christopher had always appreciated the relatively low light pollution in his part of Birmingham, which allowed for decent stargazing despite the urban environment. As he drove through the suburb of Homewood, approximately 8 miles south of downtown Birmingham, Christopher noticed unusual lights in his peripheral vision that appeared to be moving through the sky to his east in the direction of Red Mountain and the Birmingham television and radio towers. His initial assumption was that he was observing a helicopter, possibly a medical transport heading to one of the area hospitals or a law enforcement aircraft conducting surveillance operations. However, as he pulled into the parking lot of a closed shopping center to get a better view, Christopher realized that the lights were exhibiting movement characteristics that contradicted everything he understood about mechanical propulsion and flight dynamics. The lights appeared to be arranged in a distinctive cross or plus sign formation, with 4 intensely bright white lights positioned at the ends of the cross arms and a larger, pulsing orange light located at the center intersection. Each arm light was roughly the size of a car's headlight when viewed from Christopher's estimated distance of approximately 1 mile. The formation was moving in a complex pattern that included smooth directional changes, gradual acceleration and deceleration cycles, and periods of complete motionless hovering that seemed to defy the mechanical limitations of conventional aircraft. What struck Christopher as most remarkable from his mechanical perspective was the complete absence of any visible means of propulsion or support. As someone who had spent his entire adult life working with engines, motors, and mechanical systems, he immediately recognized that the level of control and maneuverability being displayed would require incredibly sophisticated propulsion technology. The formation maintained perfect geometric spacing and coordination while performing maneuvers that would be impossible for conventional aircraft, suggesting a propulsion system unlike anything he had encountered in his extensive experience with mechanical devices. Christopher turned off his truck's engine and rolled down the windows so he could listen for any sounds that might help him identify the nature of what he was observing. From his stationary position in the quiet parking lot, he could hear the distant hum of highway traffic and the occasional sound of aircraft from Birmingham Shuttlesworth International Airport. But the cross-shaped formation produced absolutely no detectable mechanical noise. The complete silence was particularly puzzling to Christopher, who knew that any conventional propulsion system capable of supporting such a large structure would necessarily produce significant acoustic emissions. As the formation drew closer to his position, Christopher could distinguish additional structural and mechanical details that ruled out conventional aircraft or rotorcraft technology. The lights appeared to be attached to a single solid object rather than representing separate vehicles in formation flight. Between the 4 arm lights, he could make out what appeared to be a metallic framework that connected the light positions in a rigid cross configuration. The structure appeared to be approximately 150 feet from arm tip to arm tip, making it larger than most helicopters but smaller than conventional fixed-wing aircraft. The object's surface had an unusual dark metallic appearance, with visible structural elements that reminded Christopher of precision-engineered machinery. He could see what appeared to be geometric panels, mounting points, and mechanical interfaces distributed across the visible portions of the craft's underside. The level of mechanical detail and precision construction was immediately recognizable to someone with Christopher's background in machine work and fabrication, but the design principles and engineering approaches seemed fundamentally different from conventional human manufacturing techniques. Christopher reached for his smartphone to document what he was witnessing, but discovered that the device was exhibiting electrical behavior he had never encountered before. The phone appeared to be receiving power and responding to basic functions, but all applications that relied on wireless communication or GPS positioning were completely non-functional. As someone with extensive experience troubleshooting electrical problems in automotive systems, Christopher recognized the symptoms as being consistent with electromagnetic interference, but at an intensity level that suggested a very powerful and sophisticated source. The formation remained visible for approximately 35 minutes, during which time Christopher observed several additional phenomena that challenged his understanding of mechanical engineering and material science. The cross-shaped structure would periodically change its apparent size and proportions, as if the mechanical framework could extend and retract different sections without any visible actuators or mechanical joints. This shape-changing capability was unlike anything Christopher had seen in conventional mechanical systems, suggesting either advanced materials technology or engineering principles beyond current human manufacturing capabilities. During the extended observation period, Christopher also noticed unusual effects on his immediate environment that were inconsistent with known mechanical or electrical phenomena. The ambient temperature around his truck seemed to fluctuate in regular cycles, becoming noticeably warmer during the orange light's pulsing periods and cooler during the intervals when only the white lights were active. As someone accustomed to working with heat-generating machinery, Christopher could recognize that the temperature variations were too regular and controlled to be natural atmospheric effects. The formation's movement patterns also demonstrated mechanical capabilities that exceeded Christopher's understanding of conventional engineering limitations. The cross-shaped object would perform instantaneous 90-degree rotations around its center axis, while simultaneously maintaining forward motion, creating complex flight paths that would require incredibly sophisticated control systems and structural engineering. The precision and smoothness of these maneuvers suggested mechanical systems operating at levels of efficiency and control that surpassed anything Christopher had encountered in his years of working with advanced automotive and industrial machinery. The craft's departure sequence was particularly impressive from a mechanical engineering perspective. The 4 arm lights began to pulse in a synchronized pattern that gradually increased in frequency, while the central orange light became steadily brighter and more intense. As the pulsing reached what Christopher estimated to be approximately 2 cycles per second, the entire cross-shaped structure began to rotate around its vertical axis at increasing speed. Within approximately 15 seconds, the rotation had accelerated to the point where the individual lights blurred into continuous circles of illumination. At the peak of this rotational acceleration, the craft suddenly stopped spinning and shot straight upward at an incredible rate of speed. Christopher watched as the formation went from hovering at approximately 800 feet altitude to complete disappearance beyond visual range in less than 5 seconds. The vertical acceleration was unlike anything he had observed in conventional aircraft, appearing to ignore fundamental mechanical limitations related to structural stress, power-to-weight ratios, and acceleration tolerances that governed conventional flying machines. Immediately after the craft disappeared, Christopher's smartphone returned to normal operation, with all wireless functions and GPS positioning working properly. He drove directly to the Birmingham Police Department's South Precinct to report his sighting, arriving at approximately 10:45 p.m. Officer Patricia Williams, who took his statement, noted in her report that Lee demonstrated extensive technical knowledge and provided detailed mechanical observations about the encounter that indicated sophisticated understanding of engineering principles and manufacturing processes. The following day, Christopher contacted his friend Marcus Johnson, a retired Air Force maintenance technician who had worked on advanced military aircraft systems at Maxwell Air Force Base. Marcus was initially skeptical of Christopher's account, but became more interested when Christopher described the specific mechanical details and engineering characteristics he had observed. As someone with experience in military aerospace technology, Marcus acknowledged that the capabilities Christopher described exceeded anything in the current military inventory and suggested engineering approaches that were beyond known manufacturing techniques. Christopher eventually contacted the National UFO Reporting Center, NUFORC, to file a detailed technical report of his encounter. NUFORC investigator Dr. Robert Martinez conducted an extensive interview with Christopher and was impressed by his systematic approach to analyzing the mechanical and engineering aspects of the experience. Dr. Martinez noted that Christopher's background in precision mechanical work allowed him to provide unusually detailed and technically accurate observations about advanced manufacturing techniques and propulsion system characteristics. During the investigation process, Dr. Martinez discovered that Christopher's sighting had been corroborated by multiple other witnesses in the Birmingham area, A security guard at a nearby industrial facility had also observed unusual cross-shaped lights in the sky during the same time period, and several residents in the Homewood area had contacted local authorities to report strange aerial activity. Additionally, air traffic control radar at Birmingham Shuttlesworth International Airport had tracked an unidentified target exhibiting unusual flight characteristics in the area during the time of Christopher's sighting. The encounter had significant effects on Christopher's work and personal interests. He began incorporating advanced materials research into his automotive restoration projects, investigating whether new manufacturing techniques might be developed based on the engineering principles he had observed. Christopher also started collaborating with other mechanics and engineers who had reported similar encounters, forming an informal research group focused on reverse engineering the mechanical aspects of advanced propulsion and structural systems. Christopher's case eventually became the subject of technical analysis by several engineering research organizations, with investigators examining how skilled craftsmen and technicians analyze and document encounters with unexplained mechanical systems. His detailed technical observations and systematic approach to mechanical analysis made his account valuable for engineers studying the intersection between UFO encounters and advanced manufacturing technology. Today, Christopher continues his work as an automotive mechanic while maintaining his involvement in UFO research as a technical investigation discipline. He has become an advocate for encouraging other skilled tradespeople and technicians to report unusual observations and to apply their technical expertise to analyzing unexplained mechanical phenomena. His case has contributed valuable technical data to ongoing studies of UFO structural engineering and propulsion system characteristics, and his systematic approach to mechanical documentation continues to influence how technical professionals investigate and report encounters with advanced technology. Christopher's experience demonstrates that UFO encounters can provide valuable engineering insights for professionals working with mechanical systems and manufacturing processes. His detailed analysis of the craft's structural characteristics and propulsion behavior has influenced research into advanced manufacturing techniques and has suggested new approaches to solving complex engineering challenges in aerospace and automotive applications. The encounter reinforced Christopher's appreciation for the possibilities that advanced engineering might offer, while expanding his understanding of what might be achievable beyond current human manufacturing capabilities and mechanical engineering principles. Rachel Brown had been working as a librarian at the Boise Public Library's main branch for 11 years when she experienced something that challenged her methodical approach to research and information verification. The 36-year-old held a master's degree in library science from the University of Idaho and had built her career on careful fact-checking, source verification, and systematic documentation of information. Rachel had grown up in rural Idaho, where her parents operated a small ranch, giving her extensive experience with the clear night skies and wide open spaces of the high desert region. She was an amateur astronomer who regularly conducted stargazing programs for library patrons, teaching them to identify constellations, planets, and various celestial phenomena visible in Idaho's exceptionally dark skies. On the evening of September 26, 2023, Rachel was driving home from a late evening library board meeting, traveling north on State Street toward her small house in the North End neighborhood of Boise. The meeting had run longer than expected due to discussions about the library's upcoming digital archive project, and Rachel was looking forward to spending some time reviewing astronomical data she had been collecting for an upcoming presentation to the local astronomy club. The time was approximately 10:15 p.m., and the autumn air was crisp and clear, with temperatures in the mid-50s and virtually no cloud cover, creating perfect conditions for astronomical observation. as she drove through the residential area near the Boise River, approximately 3 miles north of downtown. Rachel noticed unusual lights in her peripheral vision that appeared to be moving through the sky to her northwest in the direction of the Boise foothills. Her initial assumption was that she was observing aircraft from the Boise airport, or possibly military aircraft from the nearby Mountain Home Air Force Base conducting nighttime training exercises. However, as she pulled into the parking lot of a closed elementary school to get a better view, Rachel realized that the lights were exhibiting movement patterns that contradicted everything she had learned about conventional astronomy and aviation during her years of sky observation. The lights appeared to be arranged in a perfect pentagonal formation, with 5 intensely bright blue-white lights positioned at equal intervals around the perimeter and a larger pulsing violet light located at the center. Each perimeter light was roughly the size of a basketball when viewed from Rachel's estimated distance of approximately 2 miles. The formation was moving in a complex orbital pattern, with the entire pentagon rotating around the central violet light while simultaneously moving in a larger circular path across the northwestern sky. What struck Rachel as most unusual was the mathematical precision of the formation's movement. As someone who had spent years studying celestial mechanics and orbital patterns, she immediately recognized that the level of coordination being displayed would require incredibly precise navigational control. The 5 perimeter lights maintained their perfect geometric spacing, while executing complex rotational and translational movements that would be impossible for conventional aircraft operating in formation. The precision reminded Rachel of planetary motion, but operating at speeds and with maneuverability that defied known aerospace capabilities. Rachel reached for the small telescope she always kept in her car for impromptu astronomical observations, hoping to get a more detailed view of what she was witnessing. Through the telescope's optics, she could see that the lights appeared to be attached to solid structural elements rather than representing separate flying objects. Between the 5 perimeter lights, she could make out what appeared to be a metallic framework, forming a pentagonal structure with connecting struts and geometric panels. The construction appeared to be incredibly precise and sophisticated, reminding Rachel of advanced engineering she had seen in aerospace textbooks and scientific journals. The object's surface had an unusual reflective quality that seemed to change color subtly as it moved through different orientations relative to the ambient light sources from the city below. Rachel noted that the structural elements appeared to be constructed from materials that had optical properties, unlike conventional metals or composites. The framework seemed to have a slight luminescent quality, as if the material itself was generating a subtle internal illumination that enhanced the overall visibility of the geometric structure. As the formation continued its complex orbital dance, Rachel began timing and documenting the various movement patterns she was observing. Her librarian training in systematic information gathering and documentation proved invaluable as she carefully recorded the duration of each rotational cycle, the apparent speed of the translational movement, and the precise timing of the central violet light's pulsing pattern. Rachel noted that the violet light pulsed exactly every 4.7 seconds, with each pulse lasting 1.2 seconds, suggesting some form of controlled, technological timing mechanism. The formation remained visible for approximately 42 minutes, during which time Rachel observed several additional phenomena that challenged her understanding of known aerospace technology and celestial mechanics. The pentagonal structure would periodically change its orientation relative to the ground, tilting and banking in ways that allowed her to observe different aspects of its construction. From certain angles, she could see that the object appeared to have a sophisticated internal structure with multiple levels or decks connected by the external pentagonal framework. During the extended observation period, Rachel also noticed unusual effects on the local environment that were inconsistent with known atmospheric phenomena. The normal sounds of the urban environment, distant highway traffic, air conditioning units, and late evening aircraft became noticeably muted, as if the formation was generating some form of acoustic dampening field. Her digital camera, which she had been using to attempt documentation of the event, began exhibiting autofocus problems similar to those she had encountered when photographing certain deep sky objects that were at the limits of her equipment's capabilities. Rachel's systematic approach to observation allowed her to notice subtle details that might have been missed by casual observers. She observed that the formation's movement seemed to be influenced by or responsive to the local topography, following the general contour of the Boise River Valley, while maintaining consistent altitude above the varying terrain. This suggested some form of terrain-following navigation system that was far more sophisticated than anything she was aware of in conventional aviation technology. The formation also exhibited what appeared to be deliberate interaction with local aircraft. When a commercial airliner passed through the same general airspace at a much higher altitude, the pentagonal formation adjusted its position slightly to maintain what appeared to be a respectful distance from the conventional aircraft's flight path. This behavior suggested awareness of and consideration for normal aviation traffic control protocols, indicating sophisticated situational awareness and navigation capabilities. The craft's departure sequence was particularly impressive from Rachel's systematic observational perspective. The 5 perimeter lights began to pulse in a synchronized pattern that gradually increased in frequency, while the central violet light became steadily brighter and more intense. As the pulsing reached approximately 1 cycle per second, the entire pentagonal structure began to climb vertically while continuing its rotational movement around the central light. The vertical ascent was remarkably smooth and controlled, with the formation maintaining perfect geometric precision throughout the climb. Rachel was able to observe the structure for approximately 3 minutes as it climbed to higher altitude, during which time it became progressively smaller, but remained clearly visible due to the intensity of its lighting. At what Rachel estimated to be approximately 15,000 feet altitude, the formation suddenly accelerated horizontally toward the north, disappearing beyond the northern mountains in approximately 8 seconds. Immediately after the formation disappeared, Rachel's camera equipment returned to normal operation, focusing properly on distant objects and responding normally to all controls. She drove directly to the Boise Police Department to report her sighting, arriving at approximately 11:30 p.m. Officer Michael Peterson, who took her statement, noted in his report that Brown appeared highly credible and provided detailed technical observations that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of astronomy and scientific methodology. He also noted that Rachel's systematic approach to documentation and her professional background in information science added significant credibility to her account. The following day, Rachel contacted Dr. Sarah Williams, a professor of astronomy at Boise State University, to discuss her encounter from a scientific perspective. Dr. Williams was initially skeptical, but became increasingly interested as Rachel described the precise technical details and systematic observations she had recorded. Dr. Williams helped Rachel contact the National UFO Reporting Center, UFORC, to file a detailed scientific report of her encounter, and also arranged for Rachel to present her findings to the local chapter of the American Astronomical Society. NUFORC investigator Dr. Patricia Martinez conducted an extensive interview with Rachel and was impressed by her systematic approach to observation and documentation. Dr. Martinez noted that Rachel's background in information science and her experience with astronomical observation made her account particularly valuable from a scientific research perspective. Rachel's careful timing measurements, detailed structural observations, and methodical documentation provided unusual scientific rigor to her encounter report. During the investigation process, Martinez discovered that Rachel's sighting had been corroborated by multiple other witnesses throughout the Boise area. The National Weather Service office had received several reports of unusual lights in the sky during the same time period, and the Federal Aviation Administration confirmed unusual radar returns in the airspace, where Rachel had observed the formation. Additionally, 2 commercial pilots flying over southern Idaho during the same time frame had reported unusual aerial phenomena to air traffic control. The encounter had significant effects on Rachel's professional work and personal interests. She began incorporating UFO research methodologies into her library science practice, developing improved systems for cataloging and verifying unusual reports and eyewitness accounts. Rachel also started a specialized collection of UFO and aerial phenomena research materials at the library, creating what became one of the most comprehensive regional archives of unexplained aerial phenomenon documentation in the Northwest. Rachel's case eventually became the subject of academic study by information science researchers, examining how professional librarians and researchers document and analyze encounters with unexplained phenomena. Her systematic approach to observation and documentation made her account valuable for scientists studying the reliability of witness testimony and the application of scientific methodology to unusual events. Today, Rachel continues her work as a librarian while maintaining her involvement in UFO research as a serious scientific inquiry. She has become an advocate for applying rigorous documentation standards to the investigation of unusual phenomena, arguing that professional information management techniques can significantly improve the quality and credibility of witness reports. Her case has contributed valuable methodological insights to ongoing studies of UFO encounters and continues to influence how researchers approach the documentation and verification of unusual aerial phenomena. Rachel's experience demonstrates that professional training in systematic observation and documentation can provide valuable scientific contributions to the study of unexplained aerial phenomena, regardless of the exotic nature of the subject matter.